Hello friends and welcome back to another video. This time I'm going to be talking about a movie called Dirty Hole. Now, no, get your mind out of the gutter, it's not like that. It's a very innocent movie about a criminal whose name is Hole. So you stop that, this is safe for work. Alright, stop it, alright? Just stop. Stop thinking that way, you dirty sick freak. Jokes aside, Shaw Brothers' reputation preceded them. As a kid, I didn't really have a lot of access to international movies. So just like a lot of you, my intro to martial arts movies was Jackie Chan. And not his Hong Kong stuff either, his American stuff. Things like Tuxedo, Who Am I, Medallion, or First Strike were the kind of movies I had access to as a kid. And of course I also watched Crouching Tiger, which we had on video for some reason. So I didn't really hear about the Shaw Brothers until I was an adult. And even then I hadn't really seen any. Getting back into film over these last few years meant that it was finally time to delve into the genre's original studio. So I kind of expected these to be a little bit cheesy. Thankfully, Arrow launched their first pack last year, and of course, like the same reason a lot of you are probably clicking on this video, I chose the one with the most hilarious title. And what I ended up getting was actually one of the perfect intro movies to the studio. So let's get into it. One of the things I really love about this movie are the sets. The Shaw Brothers studio built this elaborate Chinese village in a warehouse in Hong Kong. And while it's always interesting to see the culture shock differences with architecture, furniture, set design in general, I still think that these sets are really beautiful. So much of it is so intricate. There's so much detail in every little piece of furniture, in every little prop, and this can be said for basically everything except for the weapons, which for some reason are made of foil. That's not to say the Shaw Brothers are doing anything different than Hollywood were doing. Plenty of Hollywood movies feature outdoor areas built inside of sets. For example, here is a still of the movie Funny Face, which was of course in the Paramount lot, but was meant to be one of the boroughs of Paris. But the thing that really stands out to me about the Shaw Brothers sets in particular, not only does this location have a real geography, it's got streets, recognisable pathways, and you really feel the connection between the location. There really is a sense of scope to this little fake village. It's also really modular. They built this one set and basically used it to shoot every single one of their historical movies. I think the thing that really lets it down, ultimately, is that it does seem like a lot of these were shot on inferior cameras than the ones in Hollywood. Because I would argue that these sets and a lot of the set design is a lot more complicated than you might see in a lot of the Hollywood sets. But these are comparable elements, and both are still very good. Take this beginning brothel scene. There's so much decoration on every single element of this set. There's running water, and bridges that go over them, and every ornament, every hanging, every piece of detail looks like it was intricately designed. The sets alongside the brilliant period clothing, fantastic furniture, and just everything about them really sets the scene and makes these movies a visual treat. And I hope you like it, because if you are interested in getting in the Shaw Brothers and you haven't already, you're going to be seeing this set a lot. I also just want to make a small note here, since there's nowhere else ready for me to put it in the video, but alongside the low quality cameras, there's also a low quality audio recording. Most of these movies are almost entirely ADR, and it doesn't really seem like they have the best microphones. But it's a small complaint, the filming practices were the weakest points of these movies. But regardless, let's move on to where the movie really shines. So the next thing I want to talk about is something that I call the Kung Fu activity. You've probably seen this trope in some form or another. It typically features a dignified, but otherwise unassuming man performing some kind of menial task. Let's say he's sweeping, or perhaps he's writing out some calligraphy, and then someone comes and they try and attack them. But they fight them off in a way that makes it look like they're still just doing the activity they were doing. Kung Fu calligraphy, Kung Fu sweeping. This movie is full of that trope, alongside several scenes which, while they don't match the trope, they match the energy of solely using a skill and making it look like you're doing nothing. And this is where the movie really starts to capture your imagination. Gordon Liu performs what can only be described as Kung Fu wine tasting, followed by Kung Fu art appreciation. And he does all of this because his character is under attack, but he doesn't want anyone to know he's under attack. And there are several scenes before this where he uses several techniques to hide his obvious skills, including one brilliant scene where he basically pretends this prosy is his bodyguard, and then puppeteers her from behind. And here's a small tidbit about this scene. I had to watch a documentary where this actress said when Wong Yu's character punched her in the chest, "He here for real," and it really hurt. You can do with that information whatever the hell you want. I just thought you'd like to know. Anyway, there's also several scenes where Gordon Liu is pretending to flee and he's using tables and chairs and accidental attack, or so it would seem, to stop Wong Yu's character Do-ho from getting him. And these scenes are so inventive and so elaborately choreographed, and they're great to see. If you're anything like me, then this wine tasting scene specifically will absolutely capture your imagination, set your world on fire. It's so inventive and it's a little bit silly, but it's so magical that it doesn't matter how silly it is, it never loses its charm, and it never feels hokey and it never really feels cheesy. I absolutely love this trope in movies. If you can think of any other examples for this trope, let me know in the comments below, and I'll watch those movies too. But it's impossible to properly assess these scenes without ultimately talking about the action itself. So let's move on to the next section. Now, I went into this movie kind of expecting the action to not be so great. I think about how much Hollywood's action degrades the further back you go. And while cutting really only became an issue in, say, the 80s and 90s, weird, weak hits, badly framed scenes, quick punches were kind of the norm in Hollywood. So I expected by going so far back that it would be the same. Prior watching this, the way people talk about Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan really made it seem like these guys were envelope pushers in terms of action quality. And given that it really didn't seem like the Shaw Brothers' production values had changed over their long running time, I kind of suspected this significant downgrade in quality. And in fact, the truth is that I couldn't have been more wrong. I would actually go ahead and say that these movies do feel very different to the kind of action movies we were getting in the 80s and the 90s from different studios, but I mean that in a really good way. I actually think that if you're a fan of musicals and the kind of elaborate dance numbers that Hollywood were doing at the time, like Fred Astaire and the aforementioned Funny Face, then I actually think that even if you don't like movies about fighting and you don't like martial arts movies, this movie and other Shaw Brothers movies still have a lot to offer you. This movie features some of the genre's strongest names, and the late great Lau Kar-leung, who handled the direction and choreography on this film. And it's masterful work all around. It genuinely is like watching someone like Gene Kelly in their prime. Going in, I might have expected it to be slow, expected the hits to be weird, expected them to follow some of the famous tropes like everyone taking their turn to attack. And if we just go ahead and look at the final fight scene, instead what we get is this complicated and rich choreography. And it's one of my favourite ways fight scenes are shot. The camera goes out wide, and they're incredibly long takes. Seriously, when watching it, just go ahead and count how many actions the characters in this scene do before the camera cuts away. And it's not just punching and kicking, they're doing these forms and these shapes with their hands and bodies that create this really beautiful imagery that makes it look so technical and so complicated. And they're not doing it slowly, they're doing it in sync with other performers. It's like an incredibly elaborate dance scene, more so than basically any other kind of martial arts movie you might see. This is the epitome of martial arts is dance. And I think there's a greater appreciation for it to be gained when you learn about how many movies this company made, and ultimately how quickly a lot of these movies were made. When you learn that a lot of these were choreographed on the day, and they probably didn't take that long to shoot them either, it makes this complicated, beautiful, dramatic, technical choreography even more impressive. It really shows that these are masters at work. Once our main characters get Lo Lei on his own, just look at how Gordon Liu and Wong Yu are so in sync, trading this staff, and how inventive and how clever this is, and how great it looks, and how great all of these shapes look. And then look at how quickly Wong Yu needs to duck to avoid getting hit by Lo Lei's glaive. This is a truly magical fight scene. And I've only really talked about the last one. All of the fight scenes throughout this movie are the perfect examples of bodies in motion. To the point where now, genuinely the final fight in this movie might actually be my favourite fight scene of all time. This movie is also full of inventive little things. As mentioned earlier with the kung fu activities, there's plenty of inventive scenes, but there's also a great scene where Gordon Liu is in a wheelchair and they fight this guy with this crazy weapon that's a cape with blades on it, but even that looks like masterful work. It feels like nothing was designed without purpose. The blades getting stuck in the wheelchair, eventually being kicked up into Wong Yu's hand. It's fantastic. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. The action in this movie is unparalleled. So my preconceived notion that this was going to be cheesy or hokey or low quality in the fight, well, it seems crazy looking back. And a lot of the other Shaw Brothers movies are of this quality. So if you like martial arts scenes and you haven't delved into this fantastic studio yet, or even if you just like dance scenes in old Hollywood movies, seriously consider giving these movies a watch. Unfortunately, it's not all smiles and sunshine. I do have one minor complaint with this movie, and it wouldn't really be fair to call this a complete review if I didn't mention it. And that's this one specific scene with what they call the 7 aunties. This movie is ultimately meant to be a comedy movie, and there's definitely a significant cultural difference in the style of comedy here, in the kind that we typically get out west. And if you're not used to it, there's a lot of it that might not land, that might not match your sensibilities. But to be fair, most of it is just slapstick, and that works in any language. But this one specific scene is really uncomfortable, and I never really enjoy watching it. In fact, I've even got to the point where I tend to skip past it. It's only about 5-10 minutes long, which follows these 7 effeminate men who come round to try and capture the 2 protagonists, and they give Wong Yu this drink that kind of turns him into one of them. I don't know what it is about this saying that rubs me the wrong way. It kind of feels like an outdated homophobic stereotype. I'm not going to say that the creative team meant any harm with this scene, especially considering in Lau Kar-leung's other movie, Mad Monkey Kung Fu, there's a scene where the main protagonist goes to a brothel, and he asks for men. And not a single character seems to have a problem with this. In fact, it seems perfectly normal and accepted in the frame of the movie. So I don't believe there's any actual homophobia going on. But this is still a really weird and uncomfortable scene. I suppose it's akin to watching some older movies that treat the idea of a man in drag to be the most hilarious thing ever. But I'll also say that if you skip past this scene, it doesn't really affect anything in the movie. Nothing really changes for having missed this. It's just a small one-off gag that lasts maybe 5 minutes. Similar to the cultural differences, there's also a couple of in-jokes in this movie. There's one joke in particular that plays off you having watched The Crippled Avengers. And if you haven't seen The Crippled Avengers, that might not land. And so that scene might be lost on you as well, and it happens quite early. But you should absolutely go and watch Crippled Avengers. That's a fantastic movie. It's one of the best. In any case, this is a really small complaint about the movie. It's one off-colour joke that just doesn't really land. It leaves a small sour taste in my mouth personally, but I don't think there was any ill intention behind it, and it doesn't really stand in the way of what an otherwise really beautiful experience. In fact, this movie acts as the perfect gateway movie, because it kind of features light intros to a lot of the things you might expect from other movies, without being too off-putting or too much of a culture clash. It's a relatively simple story that's easy to understand. It's got some of the clearest and most beautiful choreography from any of the films. It features some of the Shaw Brothers' most talented actors, and there's not really anything that I would consider a big cultural difference outside of that one joke. So then when you go in to watch the other movies, that can maybe turn up the eccentricity up to 11, like Executioners from Shaolin and Strong Cockman. Or that delve deep into Chinese politics, like the intrigue and scheming in The 5 Venoms. Or the more culturally clashing comedy stylings of a movie like Mad Monkey Kung Fu. This one is ultimately really accessible, and it really prepares you, in a way, for how crazy things eventually end up getting in the other films. And it's not packed to the brim with fights either, which means if you don't end up enjoying the martial arts style, you should still be able to enjoy this, and it can prepare you for the other movies, some of which are just fights all the way through. And that is ultimately why I love Dirty Ho. Not like that. Alright, let's calm down. So, thanks for watching, and if, like me, you choose to delve in and use Dirty Ho as your first ever Shaw Brothers movie, here are some great ones that I recommend watching afterwards. I personally really loved Heroes from the East, which features an incredible ninja fight. God bless him. I also recommend watching Crippled Avengers, as previously mentioned, because that has some of the best fights in the series. Same can be said for Kid with a Golden Arm. And Magnificent Ruffians has a lot of comedy in it, but the actual fight scenes and the story are really good in that one. And another one I really love, which is quite simple, is 5 Shaolin Masters, which, like a lot of these movies, starts with the Shaolin Temple being burnt down for some reason, but also just has a really strong ending fight scene. And it really after a while it got to me anyway. I'm also sorry for the delay on this one. I was waiting for some results from university, so I've graduated, good news all around. But I also struggle to kind of think about what movie I actually want to cover next. I've got some more ideas, so hopefully we can speed things up and we won't be spending 2 weeks or whatever trying to come up with an idea. And hopefully you liked it. If you have any specific Shaw Brothers movie favourites, please feel free to leave them in the comments below and recommend them to whoever might watch this, or me, because I've only seen maybe 20 or 30 thanks to the packs on Arrow, and I'm always looking for ones to watch next. I'm hoping that they come out with pack 3 and I'll have way more to watch and maybe way more to make videos on, you can say. In any case, you know, thanks for watching. Like, comment, do whatever you want, I don't know. Have fun.